always loved TCGs, been a huge fan of TCGs. I grew up on the Yu-Gi-Oh anime and Duel Masters and other toy anime like Bakugan and so forth. I was just not happy with any of the times people had tried to do this because they didn't actually get across the things that I liked about those shows.
As you know, I have a drive to talk to as many creators from different regions and backgrounds as possible. This continues. Nora and Iris both explain their unique entry into the tabletop gaming hobby. We dive into the origins of their new game, Perfect Draw, which, as this episode is released, is now up for pre-order. The link is in the show notes. It's a game born of creators wanting to play a specific style or type of game and not seeing it available out there, or at least done right. I loved hearing about the, well, I guess I'm going to have to make this origin story for the game. I also enjoyed seeing their creative chemistry in action. The way that creative teams work is an insight into what they make. Pay close attention to the baggage mechanic in Perfect Draw. It is pretty damn cool. Okay, sit back, relax, and enjoy my time with Nora and Iris.
Hey, this is Jake from GameGearMaster.com. When I'm not making Torino, you'll find me listening to Tabletop Talk.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guests today are Nora Jean Haynes and Iris Cassandra Saintclaire. Now, Nora is an Australian trans woman, marketer, graphic designer, and SEO specialist. She has a long history in problem solving and core design principles with a lifelong interest in tabletop gaming, including TTRPGs, board games, and TCGs. Nora now acts as the lead designer for Perfect Draw. And then there's Iris. Iris is a trans woman from Australia sharing a long history with both TTRPGs and TCGs. Despite suffering from chronic fatigue, Iris has persevered and made a name for herself in photography, writing, and local activism. Iris acts as the primary editor on Perfect Draw. And together they make up the core Double Summon Games team. Nora and Iris, welcome to the third floor.
Hi, we may need to move down to first floor wars. Nora has a fear of heights.
Mean!
I'm sorry.
Just don't look down.
I'll do my best, you know.
It'll be fine. Just don't go near any windows and you can basically pretend there's nothing.
Although, to be fair, I think sometimes you can still sort of feel it. You can feel there's nothing under the floor and it's freaky and I hate it.
The air's a little thinner up here.
Yeah, legit.
It's fine.
So, ladies, I'm going to ask you the standard question that you've gotten on every podcast, and that's going to be your origin story. I try to phrase it a little bit different. So if it's okay, I want to start with you, Nora. At one point, you knew nothing about tabletop gaming. You knew nothing about TTRPGs, board games, all of that. It really was put in front of you for the first time. Can we go back there?
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, admittedly, for someone of my age, because the way I find out about TTRPGs is through Homestuck Van Adventures. Do you know Homestuck?
I have no idea what that means.
It's a webcomic. People around my age, in the same circles as me, will know about it and know that it is very embarrassing to say that my origin story starts there.
Well, now I gotta know why it's embarrassing.
Oh, okay. Explaining the ways that Homestuck caused a bunch of problems, it sort of starts the modern fandom movement in some ways.
Oh, wow.
But there was a lot of wild things that came out of the fandom, very annoying, very, very frustrating and annoying and aggressive, mainly because it was mostly made by people my age at the time, which was like 14, 13, 15. But I started doing fan adventures, writing fan fiction about it. And the way that Homestuck worked is it was a call and response game. So people would say, I want this character to do this, and then the character would respond, sort of like an RPG. But I didn't know about that at the time. So instead, I started doing things for that. I started writing my own adventures. And eventually, someone comes to me and says, like, okay, you know, there's a forum in the place where we do the fan adventures. And they're like, how do I get better at making fan adventures? How do I do this better? How do I do this better? And the answer people say is, learn GMing tips, GM games. And I start going into that. I get like one of those boxes you get for whatever the most recent edition of D&D was at the time. I don't remember. You pick up that, try and run it for my family, goes terribly. And then I just keep doing that. I eventually start doing things online because I'm lucky enough to have been at the era where there is plenty of that. And then I hope to say I'm pretty good at it by this point.
Do you now? Let's think about that journey you went as a GM, right? So you start off, people like you need to learn how to be a GM. I have no idea what that means. You get a box set, you start, picking it up and learning it. Everybody is terrible the first time they run games, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I would be curious about your journey, right? So do you feel like there was a particular turning point, a moment where a light bulb went off? Because I'm sure there were several level ups as you went, but is there a big one you could think of?
I would say the biggest one was moving from, the type of thing that I had skill in was this sort of call and response narrative style game. The big change that got me to really get better was when I moved out of D&D into more narrative games. And, I've played D&D like games since then. But going into those more narrative games and having the chance to learn the skill sets you need and that you can learn from those sorts of games was really innovative and really useful for me at becoming a better GM.
And it sounds like it felt a little familiar based off of your previous experience writing the fiction and that call and response. Okay. So now I got to know what the games are. So give me some of the games that where you were like, oh, now I understand. Do you remember some of the early ones?
It's a little bit hard because I think some of the early ones are a lot of those one-page RPGs that you start to run as Joe's away for this session. Let's run a one-page RPG because no one needs to worry about that. I think actually the first step I take out of D&D is Numenera because I get I'm coming up at the time where there's a ton of early 5e influencers. That era where there's a bunch of YouTubers who are, I do 5e and DMing tips for 5e content. And one of them, I don't remember who at this point, does here's another game you should try because I've been really enjoying this. Numenera. It fixes the exploration problem of 5e. So I pick it up, I give it a go, and that's probably the one that I do first that's a full session. A full campaign. I think it's 3 sessions actually, where we go through that, and it's way easier to some extent for some of the things that I was strong at compared to some of the things I was weak at the time. From there, right at the time where PBTA starts to get really big, Bloody, the McElroys do their podcast with Monster of the Week. And that gives an opportunity for, in these wider spaces where people aren't aware as much of other TTRPGs, it gives it a good boost. I start looking at those systems. I think I get really into Masks, along with a few others. I probably have them all on my shelf. I try Fate at one point. And then I get really into Jenna Morin. And her work is phenomenal.
You were creating. You then turn to role-playing games to try to hone some of those skills. During those times when you're playing these games, trying out different systems, really trying to sharpen the knife a little bit, when do you start thinking, I think I want to make this type of a thing, right? I want to actually make an RPG. When do you think that idea first popped in your head?
So back when I was doing, I'd always been creating RPG content for a while. When I started in RPGs and I got into 5e, I was doing a lot of stuff on the DM's Guild because that was one of the exciting parts for me. Generally, the thing that starts it is always, I think there is a hole. There is a hole in what I want to get done. I want to play this style of game. I want to do this style of story. I want to have this style of character. How can I fill this hole? And the answer to that is usually you have to do the work. I think one of the things that is unique about RPGs is that they are, if you are GMing, it teaches you a decent bit about how to be a designer. There's obviously a lot more to do there, but it is giving you a lot of the basic skills. And there's a lot more to learn, obviously, but you go there and you're going to do, if you've done enough, probably a decent job. And you start that up. But I'm getting into university at this point. I'm getting into university. I'm learning my design skills as a graphic designer, as a marketer, all of the product design stuff we do for class. And I'm thinking the best way, the thing that I'm most excited about right now is RPGs. I want to use these skills for RPGs, and I want to solve a problem that I see, which is something that isn't there. I want to do something that isn't there. So, for example, a lot of the stuff I would do on the the DM's Guild when I was doing that would be a lot of, I am not happy with what can't be done with these classes. here's a new subclass, here's a new adventure, here's some new rules. And then as I start to move on to other RPGs, I start to, there's a good period where wide open world, you've discovered a billion other RPGs, there's usually an answer. There's no longer the problem of, I want to do a superhero game. Man, if only there was a superhero RPG.
Right.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, but instead, there ends up being more specific problems. Perfect Draw is a real example of this. I always loved TCGs, been a huge fan of TCGs. I grew up on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and Duel Masters and other toy anime like Bakugan and so forth. I was just not happy with any of the times people had tried to do this because they didn't actually get across the things that I liked about those shows. I'd done a couple other projects. One of them, funnily enough, to wrap things around together, was about people had tried to make Homestuck-inspired RPGs before. I didn't like them because they always made it... they didn't get across the narrative storytelling that is the style of that, which is weird, stupid problem-solving so that you can have arcs. Instead, it's all like, don't mechanicalize that. Instead, here's combat. And I wanted to have something that mechanicalized that style of storytelling to encourage it. So I start with those sorts of forays, and then I expand here, and then we start on Perfect Draw.
Oh, that's very, very cool. All right, Iris, you are up next. Same question. At one point, you knew nothing about TTRPGs, and you got a dice and a sheet of paper put in front of you for the first time. Can we go back there?
Okay, so when I was a kid, I was that weird autistic child who was in special needs and basically kind of sucked at everything. However, that's a lie. I was actually really good at most school stuff, and then that lasted until I did the autistic kid thing and ended up with burnout in high school. But one thing that I always had a huge passion for was creative writing. My teacher would assign me to do half a page of writing for like an assignment in writing class, a short story, and I'd come back with 15 pages worth of writing because half a page wasn't enough to do a short story for me. I would spend my free time writing I ended up writing a story that was about 150 pages long. It was, looking back on it, not very good, but proud of my childhood self for managing that all the same. I can't manage that today. So I basically always loved writing, and eventually I heard, I was in a lot of online communities, and someone was running a play-by-post game that was essentially a rules-less tabletop RP. So I guess just like an RP in general, less tabletop than anything. Based on the Zero Escape visual novel franchise, if you've ever heard of that. And I participated in that, and it was quite a bit of fun, except for when the friend group broke down, but we don't need to talk about that. And from there, I ended up just moving in a lot of nerd circles that was playing RPGs. D&D was not my first exposure to the genre. In fact, I didn't really play D&D until I had played several other things, and frankly, every single time I tried to play D&D, 5e at least, it's been a huge disappointment. But the first proper TTRPG I played was one based on the manga/anime franchise JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, if you've heard of that one.
No, I am anime illiterate.
Okay, it's about like a very stylish anime fighting with like people using basically like superpowered guardian spirits with weird abilities. As the title suggests, it's a very bizarre adventure. So I played this, and I had a pretty good mind for like game balancing, frankly, because I played like a lot of like competitive Pokemon and stuff as a child. And I was playing this for a couple of friends who wanted to try it out. And when I was playing it, I was thinking, this is way too much padded sumo. At this rate, every combat round is going to go on forever and ever. So I started modifying the system. I started cutting out things that I felt didn't work, like, oh, you take a specific damage to each body part that we all know goes so well in every single tabletop system that uses that system, and replacing it with more streamlined things that I made up, and it worked pretty well. The players enjoyed it. We did a campaign that lasted for like a couple of years before it fizzled out. And from there, I kind of went into both playing TTRPGs of various kinds. I think my next one after that was Apocalypse World, which went pretty fun. And then after that, my first in-person RPG that I DM'd, which was Monster of the Week, which was a lot of fun. I did not learn about that one through the McElroys. I have never listened to the McElroys, and I don't intend to start anytime soon.
So real quick, Iris, as you look back, I mean, that's quite a journey. And I really love how diverse the games that you were exposed to early, because typically the way this story goes is I found D&D, I played D&D for a while, and then I realized that there was other things out there, where yours is a bit of a flip on that, which I think is interesting. Looking back at it, though, what do you think hooked you? Right. So what because we heard a couple things that you bounced off of. What was it that kept you coming back and trying different games and having some resolution that I think I want to play this type of stuff? I just got to find the right game.
I wanted to write. I wanted to be able to like tell stories. And along the way, I also learned that I had a love for helping other people tell stories, but I also didn't necessarily want it to be completely without mechanics. Like, as someone who grew up playing, as I mentioned, competitive Pokemon and playing a lot of other RPGs like that, I wanted something that managed to let you tell stories while also having like some amount of crunch depth to like make characters and have them feel unique and exciting. And that kind of just led me to try out a bunch of different things. And somewhere along the way, I ended up here.
So why editing? As we talked about we did our little introductions, we have you as the primary editor. So how did you end up with that role?
So this is a bit of a weird one, and honestly, I'm just gonna say this is not the first time I have tried to like make or co-write an RPG. I used to be writing a couple of silly independent ones that never got anywhere near finished. One of them was called Dive. It was about going into people's dreams and trying to like help them out psychologically. And all I need to tell you about how naive I was regarding that one was that the main dice that I used in it were D11s and D15s. I hadn't played very much in person at the time, as you can probably surmise. And then after that, well, I've always been like pretty good at writing, frankly. It's always been like it's one of the few things that I kept doing even after I went out of school. And I'm pretty great at like reading things and like picking out typos and stuff, and like picking out game balance stuff as well. Like I can touch type pretty much faster and more accurately than almost anyone else I know, and that's even with my eyes closed. And so I met Nora, wonderful, lovely, love her so much.
I also have dyslexia, which is one of the biggest.
Oh, look at that, nice combo.
I looked at the first script of Perfect Draw when I was first brought on, and I was like, this is full of typos and bad prose and barely explained game mechanics, but there is some incredible gems of potential here. Nora has a really good hold on making compelling game systems. So if I hit this with a hammer enough, I can make something incredible.
To wrap something up as well is like, you know, I think one thing you mentioned during your portion there is like one of the things that got you really excited about looking at games in general was you started streamlining a game when you looked at it, like one of your first games you looked at. You like streamlining.
The first proper game that I saw, in fact.
Yeah. You like streamlining and looking at rules and then taking them and saying, okay, but could we do this better? This is a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a gift. It really is, because you have to be able to identify the core, right? And you have to peel everything away except for the last thing you can't peel away, right? And that is quite a gift to be able to do that. Honestly, I think that's more challenging in a lot of ways than building. Because you can really it's more accident prone, for lack of a better word. So I respect the hell out of that.
Okay, it's hard to figure out like what needs to be changed and how you can change it. Like I've had a lot of times where me and Nora are like shooting the shit over like game design and trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this work? But I guess as the saying goes, you need to kill your darlings sooner or later, and we've killed our darlings plenty of times.
I will say, you need to kill your darlings. You also need to make sure when you have a load-bearing darling to replace it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating process, and I want to dig into this part of it because this is super interesting to me. The Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and methods for crafting their creations. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about Perfect Draw on the other side of the break. We'll be right back.
Are you enjoying our long-form interviews with creatives on this podcast? Maybe you're craving deeper discussions about our guests or some of the RPG plays on our Twitch and YouTube channel. Well, I've got an opportunity for you. You see, Third Floor Wars now has a Patreon-only Discord server. You can join a vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts diving deep into every episode of our RPG plays and podcast. Connect with fans, engage in spirited discussions, and unlock the behind-the-scenes insights. For just $1 a month, access a world of tabletop gaming goodness. Connect with passionate gamers who share your love for the Tabletop Podcast and everything produced on the third floor. As a Patreon supporter, you also enjoy ad-free episodes of this podcast. You can immerse yourselves in captivating stories and fascinating interviews without interruptions, taking your listening experience to a whole new level. By joining the Third Floor Wars Patreon community, you not only gain exclusive access to the Patreon-only Discord server, but you also support the growth of my podcast and channels. Your contributions enable me to continue creating high-quality content that entertains, educates, and upskills tabletop enthusiasts like yourself. Maybe don't wait. Join the Third Floor Wars Patreon today and unlock a world of camaraderie, discussions, and knowledge. Visit patreon.com/Third Floor Wars or check the link in the show notes and come join our community. The Third Floor Wars Patreon-only Discord server awaits you. I and the other patrons can't wait to welcome you with open arms and a fistful of dice.
So I have to make a confession. When you guys reached out to me first, I thought this was a card game, or I thought it was a board game. But I very quickly figured out it wasn't, right? And as I got reading it, I was like, this is super interesting because it's bringing together some really interesting elements that extend beyond TTRPGs and extend beyond collectible card games or trading card games because of the media that's built around those things as well, right? So because of the gravity of those two objects, you have a larger piece of gravity coming in, which is great. So for those of you listening, I'm going to read you a little quick blurb about Perfect Draw, and then we're going to dig into this. Perfect Draw is a tabletop role-playing game built on the Powered by the Apocalypse framework. Combining trading card game mechanics with collaborative storytelling, the game looks to create narratives based on card game toy anime such as Yu-Gi-Oh!, Duel Masters, and CardFight Vanguard. All right, we kind of got a little bit of the origin, right? So if it sounds like, Nora, this is something you've always loved. You love the anime, you love the actual card games, the way they all work together. You search out to find some TTRPGs that take a swing at this. Each of them are a miss for you. I want to start with the moment where you stopped looking, and went, all right, I guess I got to do it.
This is a weird one. To set up, one of the big things that was always a specific problem for me with RPGs that are trying to do this sort of shonen anime storytelling where you could do this sort of thing, and with card games in general, is the TV shows about card games. One of the things that they present, the big thing that always got me, is they present a world where your deck gets to be for you. They get to represent you and your ideals and your struggles, something weird about you. They tell you something about you. You can't do that with a real card game because there's a limited amount of cards. Your cards are not made personally for you. So I got really into Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Creator, and making custom cards and custom Magic cards, sometimes Pokemon stuff, but that's a little bit weird. A lot of Hearthstone for a period. And I wanted something like that in card games, and it doesn't really exist. But then, the real thing that really pushed it is I played Everway. Everway, have you heard of Everway?
I have.
I'll explain it for the audience.
But there's people that haven't.
Everway, yes. Everway is a game made by Wizards of the Coast that reading it feels really obviously like it was meant to be Magic the Gathering, the game, and then isn't. Where one of the core systems of it is your powers are very, very loose. You just ask for your powers. Are they... I don't remember the exact questions that they ask because we take this concept and do it in a completely different way. But, you know, it's a very different thing for a card game than like a superpower, obviously. But it asks you something along the lines of, is it a powerful effect? Is it something that you can always do? And is it conditional? And we take that, and then I at this point, it's actually just me. I haven't even met Iris at this point. But I'm fiddling with, how can I do this? And I'm talking to people on forums, and I think I could write the rough draft for this as a combat system for a game. Nothing more than that. I'm well enough versed in design at this point to know that I should work from first principles. Does this core idea work? I do that. I make this idea. I say, let's make cards just like this. And at this point, I'm also working with it with, like, numbers. It's basically Magic the Gathering, but effects are made like this. And we go from there. We start testing. I call up a friend and I say, hey, let's give this a go. And then we give it a go. We play, like, 5 games in a row, and we make modifications each time we do. And then eventually we start slowly adding in more rules from there until things look close enough that I can start using that to play these sorts of stories and ideally figure out how to actually make it good.
I love the idea of the approach here. But the one thing I want to get a sense of is when we say it's built on PBTA, at this point, that kind of doesn't mean anything anymore. Because
I agree.
Yeah. So I want to, and you know, you've played Apocalypse World, you know, you're familiar with these types of games. You played Masks, Monster of the Week. When we say it's built off of that platform, as somebody who enjoys PBTA, when I go into Perfect Draw, what's going to be familiar?
When we actually start doing the playtesting, Iris can very much attest to this. We tried a bunch of things. We ended up, so we have this core combat system that we've got. We like it. We like what this is doing. But we want to make it more narrative. You know, the cards are interacting. We want to add a narrative aspect to it because one of the things that happens in these shows is bringing in your baggage and things that are painful and coming in. No, brother, you need to understand that love is real and so forth. So we tried a bunch of systems. Iris
Sure did.
Iris was here for this part.
Yeah.
It was painful. We basically did like a session for a bunch of systems where we would try this just one-on-one, simulating a bunch of guys. And it was hard work, but eventually we decided that for the out of combat stuff, the PBTA system, of like
2d6, principles, etc.
Stats roll into that. The core math fail like 6 or less, 7 to 9, 10 plus.
Mm-hmm.
Was the thing that was working best.
It keeps it nice and clean and streamlined while also having like room to play off of.
Not only that, I think one of the big things that I think was really important about the system was it led to messy situations that created baggage, that created negative things that then you needed to resolve.
Well, we didn't really have baggage until later.
We had things that simulate baggage, though. We had
we had stat loss, which was a mistake.
We had stat loss.
We had conflicts when they applied cards, which was a fun one.
Yeah, but...
And then eventually we settled on baggage.
The important thing is we always had things that went wrong that then you needed to resolve, because that was what we wanted to create narratively, is you lose a battle, and then when you lose that battle, it hurts you in your heart. And PBTA did that really well.
The fail forward, even when you fail, like you were getting things that are useful system.
But you were also getting things that are negative.
Wasn't actually in Apocalypse World itself. That was an invention introduced by like some of the later stuff. But we took that and we modified it a little bit, and we'll get into that if we end up talking about baggage.
I will say as well, though, I do think that there's been a saying that's been going around a lot, which is PBTA light. People have been saying that about a lot of games, and that's especially true of games that are very combat-focused, like ours is. You know, it's about card game combat. It's about playing with your cards. So we've got a combat phase that's very important. And that is I would better describe our game as PBTA light, but that is something that you have to sit down and explain to someone if they don't know that.
Yeah, which is a whole mess. So it's like faster to explain it as a PBTA game and then let people.
And that's part of why I phrase things as built on the Powered by the Apocalypse framework, because I don't like saying we are a PBTA game, because I don't think that's usefully true. No. But built on the framework of PBTA is very correct.
Well, and it sounds like there's a lot that I'll be familiar with, right, when I go in there. How about playbooks? Do you guys, did you guys work with playbooks, or?
We got playbooks. We've got 10 playbooks, and we got 5 more coming in the future expansion for Kickstarter.
Yeah, really good plug, dear. Yeah, I think playbooks are great. They help you push a really good narrative.
They're like, this is for playing a trope or like a character.
And we're talking about like shonen battle anime. If there is any genre where we are talking about, like, the commedia dell'arte of the modern day, it is the shonen battle anime archetypes.
You've got the energetic protagonist, you've got the edgy rival, you've got the mysterious shadowy figure, you've got the former villain who's trying to reform, you've got the strange creature from another dimension, etc., etc., etc.
Amazing. Yeah, it's funny because when I'm coming across games that are really trying to simulate a very specific genre, right? Which is what the two of you are doing here. I do think playbooks really help do that. It's not just for those that, you know, I hear some people who are not familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse will say, well, those are just character classes. Like, no, you don't get it. Playbooks are different. Playbooks are different because there's a lot that happens on that sheet. And you can really differentiate far more than you can from an archetype standpoint. We've got all these different influences, but we have a very specific style we're going for, right?
Yes.
Is when I sit down and play Perfect Draw, is there a world that I'm stepping into, or is the table creating the world? So how do you handle the setting in canon?
Mm-hmm. We have a default setting included in the book called Shuffle City, which is mainly there to kind of like facilitate people who just want to jump in and play. It's like one part New York, one part Tokyo, all parts
I think Hong Kong is a big inspiration.
Hong Kong is probably, a big inspiration too. But we very much encourage people to make their own things, and that's why instead of having like set adventures like you might see in other tabletop role-playing games, Shuffle City is more, here is a bunch of places that could act as plot hooks, here is a bunch of example characters with decks, and we encourage you to pick and choose these guys and like throw them into your own tabletop.
I think it's a really big exemplar, legitimately, that like, okay, you go to the Shuffle City chapter, and it's maybe 50 pages, I think, at the moment. Most of those pages are encounters and pre-made NPC encounters. It's basically your monster manual equivalent as setting.
I gotta tell you, that has become my favorite approach. I'm old as shit. So I come from the world where there's set adventures and modules, right? And when I learned this different way to run a game where you have a world and it's spinning, and it was spinning before these characters existed. It's going to spin after these characters existed. And we're just going to drop these agents of chaos in there and see what the hell's going to happen. That's changed things for me. And it sounds like, you know, you very much have that approach. A bit of an idea where I see this really played out is if you've looked at anything that Free League is putting out. Free League has really embraced this idea with their adventure site concepts, which I just think that's a great way to approach it. So I want to now go to you, Iris. We've got a little bit of an understanding of what Nora's doing, what she's putting together, how things are kind of the momentum is going. But as we said before the break, you were handed a hot pile of garbage. So
Mean to her, but yes.
Yeah, no, it's right.
Tell me first off, how did you know that there was something there? So what did you find amongst all of the things you didn't like? What did you see that you were like, okay, I want to spend some time and energy here?
So the way that I get into this is I very much enjoy TCGs as well. I didn't watch the anime too much as a kid, but I read various mangas. I read like the Pokemon manga, the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, some other like weird toy anime manga that no longer really exists. Shout out to Dragon Drive. And so essentially I meet Nora. We're friends for a year and then start dating. And we're talking about card games and sharing our interest for that. Nora drags me into MTG. I drag her into Netrunner. We play various other stuff together. And eventually Nora decides to share Perfect Draw with me, and we're talking about that idea. And I'm like, okay, so obviously it is a mess. There are a ton of mechanics in the first draft of Perfect Draw that I saw that straight up no longer exist in any form.
Yeah.
But I see the playbooks and I see the card game rules, and I'm like, I've wanted something like this. And these card game rules feel like they could work really, really well. And so I start playing test sessions with Nora. Mm-hmm. One of the first ones I had that was a lot of fun was I played as the glowing playbook, which is like the very positive, supportive figure who kind of like ends up being like a center of charisma or community. And the character that I make for this is a former like a DJ and like violinist who kind of like retired after a messy band breakup and is like making music anonymously now but wants to get attached to people. And then things go very badly for her. She ends up being like abducted by a cult and being implanted with supernatural powers. And like the drama there of getting to express her feelings through the card game combat and thinking of ways that I can interact, getting to describe it. I'm like, I love this. I'd love this. I want to see it be good. And so I start like banging out like game balance stuff with Nora. Like, I think this mechanic doesn't work very well. I think we need more ways to like customize cards like this. Mm-hmm. I think that the stat game system is fail more and causes like cycles of just getting worse, et cetera, and we iterate from there.
And basically, in my experience, the way it sort of goes is we end up with this period of you look through everything that doesn't work, and then we come back, and then I'm like, we figure out a system that does and is smart. Actually,
I am very good at figuring out the problems. Nora is very good at figuring out the solutions. I like to describe it as she's the ideas girl. I'm just the person who hits it with hammers until it looks ready.
And that's shockingly common. I hear that all the time, which is there are people that are very good at saying this doesn't work, and those are the last people you want fixing it. So they're really good at finding what's not working, and for whatever reason, that skill set, that mindset, isn't great at fixing it. And I hear that all the time, and that's very, very fascinating to me. To understand, which is where. And what's beautiful for the two of you ladies is that you've got both of that now, right? And what I'm hearing is a really nice ping pong that's happening between the two of you. I break it, I throw it back to you. You put some new stuff in there. You break it again, and we're just going to go back and forth. And it sounds like there's a lot of serious.
Oh, it's a really big advantage now that we live together that we can just do that so much faster.
Yes.
Yeah, we're spending so much time of every day just talking to each other.
We just sit down at our desk, and then we just, okay, this, let's try this, let's do this.
That's cool.
Legitimately, I think we got more work done in the last year since we've lived together than most of the previous 3 years we were working on this.
I don't think that's true.
I think we got the refining is really hard.
It's the least fun part, but it ends up being what makes or breaks it, right? So
I would say actually the least fun part is writing down all of the information of refining is fun. It's writing down all of the stuff that you need to make sure people know, but is really boring.
It's this really painful dance of making it read good and making it concise while also making it so that people don't be like, hey, where is this thing? Oh, it was on like the top right corner of page 125. You just missed it. It's such a delicate balancing act.
Documentation sucks. Nobody likes writing it. We all love it, we all love when it's done right,
Yes.
but nobody likes making it. So,
Sorry, you were saying something.
well, what I was going to say is that I find this really interesting, especially this accelerated process when the two of you start living together. And it sounds like we've got lots of little mini iterations that are going back, that you're finding little things and working through those and then building off of that and so on and so forth. During that process, and if I've done the math right, we're looking at 3.5, 4 years. During that process, there had to have been a moment when the two of you looked at each other and realized, I think this is going to happen, right? Because you can false start these a million times. And in order to make a good game, you kind of have to make 4 bad games first, right? So
Yes.
at what point in this iteration did the two of you recognize we may want to push this past the finish line?
Oh, Iris, are you okay with me doing this? Because
Yeah,
I
go
have
right ahead.
the exact time.
Yeah.
So there had been several periods during this. We have a Discord that was originally just for playtesters. It starts with I bring in a couple of friends, and we are just like, okay, let's playtest this stuff. Then at some point we get to the rules. We finally have a complete version of the rules, and we put it up on, like, we go on Reddit, we go in the other places you find playtesters, and you say, hey, anyone want to try this? I think it's a cool idea. They come in and they say, this is dog water. You need to fix all of this stuff. A lot nicer. I mean, like, people aren't mean.
Yeah, they weren't that mean.
Okay, there was a couple people who were mean, mostly from Reddit. They
Mean
come
people
in
on
there and
Reddit?
they're like,
No.
That would never happen. This is really spurious accusations.
But they come in there and they're like, this doesn't work. I don't like this. This doesn't work. And, at this point, I think that we've gotten pretty good at... and this comes mostly from... Iris is a photographer. I'm a graphic designer. We have experience working with testers and people who are doing that stuff, which makes this process go a little bit smoother than it might for, like, truly new designers.
Right.
We know when to not listen to people to some extent. But they're right is sort of the problem. They come in and they say, this doesn't work, this creates bad gameplay experiences, and they're right. And we have to come up with new solutions. We do this maybe 3 times, and then on the 4th, people come in and they say, this is really cool. This is really exciting. I like what this is doing. I'm playing a game of this and I am having fun. I'm coming back and I'm saying, this was a really cool gameplay experience. This does what I want. This creates these narrative experiences. And I think that's the moment where we know we can actually start considering putting this to crowdfunding.
So, question, because there's an important space now that we've isolated out. There was the space where this is still hot garbage, and then the space where, like, this is really pretty cool. What happened between those two spaces?
Playtesting. So much playtesting.
A lot of playtesting, yeah. We've played quite a few different campaigns.
Well, not just us. The important thing is all of the people we brought on did a bunch of playtesting, came back with results, and each time we did that, we would look at it and we would compare them.
And we would see, like, what people are doing with the system that they are really that they are particularly enjoying and leaning towards. Like, a lot of people are like, okay, we're doing player versus player stuff, and there were no player versus player rules in Perfect Draw at the time. So we're like, okay, we need to, like, iterate a few different ways of doing this.
But then the other thing that I think is really important is we watched way more card game anime, and we played way more other RPGs. So, and when we were doing these things, we would take notes. Me and Iris, we had our own little private, here's a thing we should note for Perfect Draw. We played way more RPGs, very frequently, as much as we could. And we watched way more card game anime, as much as we could. Like, a good example, Yu-Gi-Oh! Both of us had watched maybe 70% of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is pretty big at that point already. We watched the final 30% each. Mm-hmm. We went through... watched Vanguard, watched Duel Masters, watched other card game anime, other toy anime, and we took notes on how does this narrative work? How do these narratives work? And how would you mechanicalize that? What are we trying to do? Like, a good example, stat gain and stat loss. This was a mechanic we had ages back that was, in retrospect, nonsense. Basically...
when I came onto the system for the first time, one of the first things that stuck out to me was stat gain and stat loss, where it was essentially, if you failed on a roll or other things happened, like you did badly in a battle, you would take stat loss, which would lower one of your stats by 1, and this would remain until you won a battle. And if one of your stats ever fell to -3, your character functionally died or was out of the story. And I looked at this and I was like, this is bad.
But the problem is, as well, we cut this system for a while, and then the narratives broke down.
Yeah, because when you don't have that sense of like change and being affected by things around you, you can't make those stakes. You can't make that matter. You can't have that incentive. So we end up creating conflicts instead.
Yeah.
Which is like when something bad happens to your character, you represent it by binding it to a card, essentially. So you could have a card in your deck that would represent like an unhealthy crush on someone or a wound you took or a...
But the problem with that was it was really fiddly. But at the same time, like, so we ended up going with baggage, which is the current system.
Yeah.
So
but the way you get to those is...
One second, though, because we've mentioned baggage a few times, and now I need to know what that is. So talk to me about the baggage mechanic.
I leave this to you, Nora.
The important thing about the baggage mechanic is it's just simplifying what we did with conflicts. It's a system that's in our other PBTA games. Basically, when something happens that should affect your character, so, you know, your roll is 6 or less, or something that a narrative moment comes up, baggage is the narrative moments of things you want to resolve. While you have them, you do get a -1 to rolls relevant to them, not to a stat, so you still keep that up. But it goes to a maximum of -1. So you can only ever be rolling at a -1. And the important thing about baggage, which is a really important thing we pulled together through watching a ton of card game anime, is they are a benefit while you're playing the card game.
Oh, that's interesting.
So in the narrative, your baggage pulls you down. If you've got like a broken leg and you try to jump across a building and you got baggage, you get a -1. However, if you have a broken leg and you start a card game and the person who broke your leg is there, you have more advantage and you're going to be able to win the card game more easily because you have passion and you, this guy.
Yeah, and advantage is basically one of the systems in card games itself that lets you do those very like anime style things like, oh, I activate my counterspell and stop your play that would have won you the game, or oh, I spend my advantage to draw just the perfect card off the top of the deck.
Advantage is the system that I think transformed our game legitimately from a game that was like bad and middling and not working or fine at best to one that was working. Because once we started instituting that, and this came from watching a bunch of stuff and a bunch of playtests and solving like finding the puzzle pieces in our notes and then taking the notes of like the playtests of where things weren't working and just combining them.
Yeah.
And advantage was the system that really just locked everything together.
That's very, very cool. All right, so quick question. I know I've got people listening right now. I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I am, who are not super, like I've watched some Yu-Gi-Oh! I've watched a couple episodes of Duel Masters. I've never seen CardFight Vanguard before. But let's say that we've piqued some interest here in this genre. And we've got some people listening right now that say, I think I want to like dig into this a little bit more after you have consumed so much of it. What would be your curation if you had somebody who was a virgin? Where would you direct them to get started?
Okay. If they're a complete virgin, this is harder because so much of it is based on like the genre is completely based on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game original series.
Right.
So you probably start with the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and IMO skip the filler. Skip the side arcs.
Read the manga is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, read the manga is definitely the best way. The manga is legit.
Otherwise, I would say, like, if you know the basics of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, then, for the good stuff, I would recommend Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s is the best Yu-Gi-Oh! series. It's better than the original. It's incredible. It's absolutely phenomenal. They moved to a new production team very recently, and it's great.
Yeah, their game writing staff is just like excellent in making everything like have interesting character dynamics. And like the sad thing is that since it is using the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel rules, which is essentially a version of the game that is essentially a whole new game that's only in Japan, most people are like, oh, it doesn't have the Yu-Gi-Oh! I know, so I don't want to watch it.
And also you can't play it. The other one I would recommend, especially if you are a Magic the Gathering fan and you come from being a fan of like card games in general, but not card game anime, Destroy All Humankind That Can't Be Regenerated. This is a manga that is actually sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, made in Japan.
But it was actually sponsored?
Yeah, they actually released promos with the volumes. It's
Damn,
really cool.
all right.
Yeah, but it's a manga about the classic Magic the Gathering tournament scene. mixed in with some romance and heightened battle anime storytelling.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really good. The duel writing is phenomenal. The storytelling is phenomenal. Then otherwise, I would recommend Duel Masters, really good, especially the recent series. They're really fun. Bottleman DX is really fun. Really fantastic character designs and some really fun storytelling. And just any toy anime you'd like. I think, if you like Digimon, and a lot of people like Digimon, you grew up on Digimon, you are right. Not in the sense that, you were right to like it. So, you are right to say that these are the same thing as Yu-Gi-Oh! And the storytelling principles you were telling here are going to translate to Perfect Draw.
Got it. That helps a ton. And this is going to bleed us right into what you've been grooving on. So let's take another quick break. When we get back, I'm going to interrogate these ladies, and we are going to find out something recently that both of them have found that has consumed them as much as they hope Perfect Draw consumes you. We'll be right back. This is the part of many podcasts where someone comes on, interrupts the show, and explains that you should consider paying for the content that you're listening to right now for free. That pitchman explains by giving $1 or more a month, you not only support the show, but you allow the show to grow and improve. Here on the third floor, we refuse to interrupt your episode of Tabletop Talk with such time-wasting pleas. We pledge never to run a spot asking you to go to patreon.com and give $1 or more a month, because supporting content creators keeps the content coming, even if there is a link in the show's description. And there is. We don't ask you to click it and become a patron. We don't waste time rambling about the benefits like early access to episodes, getting episodes without ad breaks like this, or even getting a chance to play in one of Craig's RPG sessions. Anyway, enjoy this episode knowing Tabletop Talk, despite being supported by its patrons, won't engage in such blatant appeals for support. So now that, and before the break, and I mentioned this during the break, what really I think was exciting about asking you about how to get someone started about this is we got a chance to really see how passionate the two of you are about this genre. And that, I think, is a critical ingredient to making a good game. If you're making a good game, if you're making a game about a very specific genre, people making that game better frickin' love it. And boy, oh boy, we saw that as you guys were curating the paths to enjoying what you enjoy. But we're going to put all of the toy anime aside. What I want to know is, is there a video game, Iris, or a book, or an RPG, or a cartoon, or something recently that you've discovered that has just occupied your brain?
There are so many different things. I'm kind of all over the place in terms of media taste. So one thing that I want to shout out immediately is a little puzzle game called Lingo that I spent like several weeks playing recently. It doesn't look like much to start with. The graphics are very...
And that's the best puzzle games. The best puzzle games are always like that.
It is also probably the best puzzle game I've ever played. It is a game about solving word puzzles. You walk around this weird non-Euclidean space where like the hallways wrap in impossible ways, and you're kind of trapped in this maze of creation. And you solve word puzzles. You'll see boxes with words on them, and you need to figure out the answer word. And the fun thing is that every single box has like its own rule that you kind of learn. Like, for example, a white box that's on like chest level means you just type it in as is. But a white box on like foot level means you write a synonym for it. And then a black box on foot level means you write an antonym for it, the opposite. And so on and so forth. And it just gets to all of these really fascinating and creative puzzles that are just like, it was deeply fun and rewarding to solve, even if it was frustrating at times. It's worth the frustration. Other things that I've been enjoying lately include Dungeon Meshi, which is a manga that's getting an anime adaptation now about Essentially, imagine a D&D like style like fantasy world, but the people who are descending into the dungeon, the main focus is on them cooking and eating the monsters that they find there. The art is incredible. The comedy beats are immaculate. The story is legitimately really tense and has some moments that I absolutely cried at. It is just genuinely a beautiful experience, and it's relatively bite-sized, if you'll pardon the pun. It's only 92 chapters. Other things that I've been enjoying on top of that include classic literature Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes.
It's so good.
I am only 3 or 4 chapters in, plus the prologue, and I've been reading it to Nora and our other girlfriend, Cass, and it's delicious. It's delectable. Sometimes you read the classic stuff and you're expecting it's going to be stuffy, and it's the most hilarious, like, jaunty ride you've ever read.
Don Quixote, it's amazing when it was written. Like, the fact that you can read Don Quixote today and literally laugh out loud and see the layers of the themes and the allegories. And I mean, it's incredible. And then you flip back to the back of the book and you're like, holy shit, like, I cannot believe this was written when it was. So I'm a huge fan of Don Quixote.
It's written with so much incredible irony. And
the fact that it starts off with clearly a false anecdote about the writer being like, I can't write this. I can't do the brave knight Don Quixote, who definitely existed, justice. And then my very real friend shows up and is just like, well, if you can't quote all of these things, then just steal from them. And then it has, no joke, like 4 pages worth of clearly comedic sonnets written by fake authors about the protagonists of the cast. And it's just like, it is written with so much simultaneous love and derision for the genre it's coming from.
Yes.
This deconstructive spirit that, hilariously, me and Nora both agree, kind of make it a direct parallel to what Homestuck is to a lot of, like, online text adventure and, like, like sci-fi fantasy stuff.
Regrettably, I think the best pitch for Homestuck, if you had to do that, was it's Don Quixote but for Monkey Island.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It starts with,
That's
like,
cool.
haha, funny point-and-click / text adventure interactions, haha, they dropped the bathtub through the wall, and then spirals into increasingly, like, wild lore and character interactions. And the thing that kind of happens in the latter half of both Don Quixote and Homestuck is...
Weird romance subplots? So you're talking about the weird romance subplots?
No, I'm talking about the creator response, because, like, the second half of Don Quixote is only written because someone else tries to write the second half of Don Quixote. Cervantes ends off the first part with, and maybe there will be more adventures of Don Quixote in a spoof of other knightly genres of the time. And then someone goes and writes it and misses all of the irony, all of the poking fun. And Cervantes is like, that's it. This sucks so much, I'm coming back to write the second part. And kill him. And this is something that happens with Homestuck in very real time. People will suggest, like, theories or character interactions, and Andrew Hussey, the writer of it, will respond
spitefully.
Highly spitefully. The latter half of Homestuck is incredibly spiteful, and I did not enjoy it.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
It's just like the parallel of here between, like, an author directly responding to their fan base and their milieu is just very fascinating. It's a shame that for Homestuck, instead of it being to other, old writers, it's to 14-year-olds on the internet. Most of them mentally ill.
It's really funny in that reading. I do think if I got to do an English degree, I read Don Quixote when I was a kid. I'm really enjoying reading it again with Iris now. I would love the comparative text would be legitimately fascinating.
But apart from that, I'm mostly floating from media to... apart from Don Quixote and all the other things I mentioned, right now I'm kind of in a transitory space between media. Like, I've tried to play a variety of video games right now, but I've finished replaying a lot of stuff, and a lot of the new stuff I've been playing hasn't sat right with me. So I've ended up reading more books. I'm currently reading Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell, which is about cults and how they influence people through, like, various, like, choices of language, us versus them rhetoric, gaslighting, love bombing, etc. and I find that deeply fascinating. And right now, apart from that, I'm just desperately waiting for some new horror to catch my eye because I love horror media so much. My gender is horror media, and I am just like, come on, I need something good. I need to go finish House of Leaves. Anyways, that's basically all for me.
Listeners know that horror is my gender as well. That it's my absolute favorite. So now I'm going to put you on the spot and ask the worst question, which is, can you give me, and it doesn't have to be in any order, maybe like I want to get a feeling because there's all kinds of different horror here. So let's stick just with movies. Give me your top 3, roughly speaking. We'll put it down in pencil, not pen or in stone.
That's hard because I don't start in movies with the horror genre. I start with online creepypasta. And in fact, when I was 14, 15, I actually moderated one of the biggest creepypasta websites on the internet. Long story. I shouldn't have been doing that as a kid, but thankfully the community that I worked with was plenty accepting. And so I start very often the oeuvre of Marble Hornets and other Ben Drowned and other such online things. But right now, in terms of favorite horror movies, I think it's got to be The Babadook. The Babadook just like is genuinely such a masterclass of this genre of knowing when to hold out the tension, of knowing how to hit you with emotional stakes. It has incredible story writing that I would parallel to the fantasy versus mystery works in Umineko no Nakakoro ni, which is another exceptional work of media, but I don't have time to go into that one right now. And it just like, it is so incredibly impactful on all levels. And apart from that, obviously, The Thing is a classic. I like it a lot because...
Oh my God, I'm so in love with you right now.
They just like me for real. My gender is The Thing from John Carpenter's The Thing. I am the weird flesh horror creature. Skinamarink, I very much enjoyed, but I need to finish watching it.
I couldn't finish it.
I'm a little bit with you on that one, Nora. I get why people loved it. It's just that was not my jam.
Skinamarink is good for every reason that I couldn't watch it.
Right, exactly. I have the exact same opinion. And what's incredible to me about Babadook, when that movie was over, I just sat there and I realized that I had just watched something really important. And what's interesting for me is that I think it was so good at what it did that I may never watch it again because it was almost too much for me. It was almost too much. And I don't know if I want to go through it again, which is oddly a huge compliment.
So you'd say it was maybe like, so you'd say it was like,
fair.
If we compare it to like the level of what Skinamarink was doing, it was like just on that edge and was like, it was just hanging just at that edge so that you could get through it.
Yep.
But not any further.
Like, I feel that there is a video game, Night in the Woods, that did basically the same thing to me. Like, I finished playing it, and I was like, that was incredible. I was emotionally destroyed for a week, and I refused to go back to Night in the Woods, despite me trying to replay as many of my games in my library as possible and get all achievements, because I'm not ready to do that to myself.
The one for me that is a manga called Bokurano Ours, which is incredible, and also changed my life, legitimately. And I could not go back to it because it would ruin me.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I totally appreciate that. All right, you're up, Nora. What are some things that have gotten into your brain?
I'm going to try to not go as numerous as Iris.
Sorry.
It's okay. Especially because right now, my job is, I have the marketing degree. So I'm the one who's doing a lot of the marketing stuff for Perfect Draw, keeping that all up. I'm also the one who knows how to do layout stuff. So I'm kept busy that way, for the moment at least. That said, I've got a lot coming up. I'm very excited to get into Dragon's Dogma 2 when that comes out. But right now, the main thing that's been keeping me up is I've been playing this a lot with my other partner, Cassandra. Backpack Battles is a really fun auto battler roguelike where you ever played Resident Evil 4. You know how you have the management of your backpack. It's that, but you're doing it to create your combat specs. You're doing things like, I want to put a banana in here because it's going to heal me more and it's going to give me more stamina. But I want to put this weapon in, but it's huge, so how am I going to fit that? And this banana cares about being next to this onion, so I need to be managing all of that stuff. Really fun. It's a great thing to do while I'm otherwise, I kind of just need to relax and think about something but not something else and just put on a stupid YouTube video.
Yep.
Otherwise, I would say I've just finished In Stars and Time, a really great indie game that was really meaningful in a lot of ways. But I'm not sure I would absolutely call great. It's got a few things that really hamper it down, especially that it has this thing which I've noticed a lot in especially indie RPGs, where these take a long time to make, and because of that, people are building their game with a lot of assumptions about their characters that they've had in their head for 7 years while they've been making this.
Right.
And it does feel like that. And because of that, you end up with a lot of moments that sort of, I think, fall flat, but you also end up with a lot of moments that are bloody incredible. And I enjoyed, and I really liked going through that arc and feeling those emotions. It's really good at making you feel the emotions of repetition and pain through repetition and just wanting it all to end and having to do this all again and taking advantage of people when you shouldn't be taking advantage of people and should be loving them. It's really great.
Oh.
But the thing which I'm going to try and end with is, and I'm going to say this because I think everyone and their mother should read this, is Shimeji Simulation. This is a manga that came out recently by the author of Girls Last Tour. Girls Last Tour is something that, if you've not heard of it, the readers who definitely should read Shimeji Simulation might have. But Girls Last Tour is a story of two girls in the post-apocalypse realizing that they're going to die. And that the trying to find other people and that they're maybe the last people on Earth. What do you do when everything's over? And it's very depressing in a way that's slightly hopeful. And Shimeji Simulation is almost a response by that same author to their own work in a fascinating way, because it's about a world that is entirely mental, in the sense that everything is thought, everything is ideas, everything is translation and language. And how do we find love in that? And then we do. We find love in that. We find the people that we care about. And even if it's really, really scary, the way that language means we're not going to be seen entirely correctly by other people, that we're going to merge into each other, we're going to become a bit of each other. Because that's sort of what it is, to spend a lot of time with someone, is to take parts of them and them take parts of you. And that's scary. That's terrifying, especially when, we see examples in the narrative of that going terribly codependently and horrifyingly in this almost gruesome way, because everything is thought as there's these literal mergers. And finding the ways to exist and be happy in spite of all that, in spite of every fear and trauma and the way that the world doesn't make sense. And it's legitimately beautiful and has fantastic art, which I will highly recommend. It's just a fantastically cute art style.
And then, the one last thing that I want to shout out on behalf of me and Nora.
Oh, I gotta...
Spirit Island.
Oh, of course. I'm sure everyone, if you're a board gamer, you've heard of Spirit Island.
It's good.
It's obviously good. We've been playing it for years now.
I've heard it's one of the greatest things ever. I've never played it, but I've heard it's one of the greatest games ever made.
I would say it's not necessarily for everyone. But it's have you played a Euro game? Yeah. Imagine a Euro game, but it's co-op and it's versus it's a Euro game, but it's co-op and you're versing the colonists instead of
it's a settler destruction game is how they describe it, and it's a lot of fun.
I do think it's very important to note that it is a Euro game and as complex as a Euro game.
Yeah, it is a game of many interlocking moving parts that shouldn't work together but somehow do, and it is just incredible.
It absolutely is, and I think one of the best things about it is just the ways that it creates a bunch of problems in a bunch of different areas, and you have ways to solve them, and you have this power to solve them, but not all of them. So it's a game about deciding where you want to sacrifice things, and when you do, deciding how you can combo together to make, you can work together to do slightly more than you could have before.
It's good.
It's really good.
Very, very nice. So for those of you listening, you know the routine. Everything we've been talking about, from Perfect Draw to the Grooving On recommendations, the curated list of how to get into toy anime, all of it is right below you. So just scroll down right now and look at the show notes. We'll have links all there. There's a lot of really cool things to do on a Sunday morning that doesn't involve talking to me. So I really appreciate you ladies making the time.
No problem.
Thank you. We actually have a bloody meetup with some friends right after this. We probably need to get dressed after this.
I'm already dressed.
All right, well, let's
Lucky
wrap
you.
this up.
I still got my pajama pants on.
Skill issue.
For those of you listening, this is the end. You made it. I appreciate you listening. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to Tabletop Talk and share it with your friends. Check out our content on YouTube and Twitch. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and stay updated on everything coming from Third Floor. All the links are in the show notes. Take care, floorheads.
Well done. Well
Section
done.
1 done. That was nice and clean.
Lovely.
No, you both understand the show, which I really appreciate.
Oh, do you have a lot of people come in and not understand exactly what you're talking about?
You know what it is a lot of people are very used to, like, I get it's not uncommon for me, especially for some of the bigger people that bigger names that I interview. They're like, will you send me the questions? I'm like, I don't have any. I've got this call sheet, and this is a conversation, and you have complete control. Right. So at any point, I've had it happen where I've asked a question. They're like, ugh, and I'm like, OK, we'll move on. The audience will know nothing about it.
I can imagine that being a bigger deal if you're talking about like a bigger company or like a bigger person where it's like, look, I've worked for corporations before. I work in the news for my day job. And I know that there are situations where I would not want to talk about something for my job where I do not know everything about it. Or, like, there's a narrative we've pushed for something else and this could contradict something else. Right. So it's a lot easier, obviously, when we are the two people.
It is. But I will tell you, because I spend so much time focusing on who I'm talking to, right, versus what they make, it's easy for me. And I don't know. I've done 200 of these, and it's maybe happened 4 times, where I go to a place I don't think is tender. But it is, right? It's a place that they don't want to talk about because there's a lot of things I don't know behind that request, right? And it's the one thing I love is that every one of those guests, I can see it in their face. And every time I'm like, no big deal. Let's keep going. And I've never lost an interview, right? And if you go, you would have no idea figuring out what those 4 guests were on that. And that's because we didn't lose the energy. I didn't lose their trust, I guess is another way to put it as I was doing it. So
that makes sense. And I'm taking as some like, how did your parents affect your game design style stuff or the other? Yeah,
like one of them I asked, have you ever wanted to do this full time? So they have a full time job and this is a part time thing. And I said, "Is this?" And the person said, "Craig, it's kind of a touchy subject in the family right now. Can we talk about something else?"
Okay.
Like, shit, I had no idea, right? So it was not like it was a very innocent question on my part. Right. But boom, take a right turn. We're good to go. Yeah. Nope, nobody's the wiser.
And good on them for just taking that as well and just saying, "Hey, let's move on."
Mm-hmm.
It's why I spend so much time trying to make everybody feel comfortable and try to make it a conversation so that when we do that, we have the trust there. But also, I mean, if you go back and listen to some of my interviews, I pull out some really important stuff. And one of the most common things I get from guests is, Craig, I've never talked about that before. That was really great to finally get that out there. Just an aspect of their creative process that nobody's ever asked them about, because so many people ask the first question. And I try to go, all right, here's the first question, now the second one, now the third one, and then I get to the meat, on the third one. So I'm about to use the two of you that way in a second. So.
Oh, lovely.
I imagine that it's a lot of like managing to improvise and like working with the person that you're interviewing, and I think that's an admirable skill. You're doing great.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to bring us back.
Okie dokie. Alrighty.
I love the passion.
I'm really glad. I am so excited. I need to catch up on Go Rush. That's the most recent Yu-Gi-Oh series. I need to catch up on it. I'm about 30 episodes behind because I got really busy with making Perfect Draw, ironically. So I haven't caught up because it's not dubbed, which means I can't watch it while doing something else. I need to be focusing on it. But it's really good.
Yeah.
It's actually really,
cool.
really good.
The problem is it had kind of a slow start compared to 7.
Its real problem is it's trying to start up as a, we're going to teach you the basic principles of card games. Do you know what a normal monster is?
And,
Gotcha.
7s did not do this as much.
Yeah.
And so it has that unfortunate kind of hump at the start. If you will.
It's just 20 episodes, too.
But then it gets
Boy, that's a
good.
lot.
Yeah.
But then it gets good. All right.
There's someone on our Discord server who is obsessed with it. Every episode that comes out, they will write an essay on it about its
isn't that amazing?
Emotional meanings. It's really incredible because every time you read it, they're right. They write this essay on about this children's show and about the meaningfulness of the storytelling and the queer romances that go on within it and the narratives of there. And I mean that in not a fandom way as well. I mean it is literal.
Right.
And they're right, is the wild thing about it at every step. It's really interesting.
That's cool.
Also, shout
That's
out to the
cool.
Perfect Draw Discord in general right here, because, it's gone through so many, kind of...
We're talking like we're on the podcast is what I'm noticing as well.
Look, I'm in community speaking mode. It's fine. It's gone from, 50 people
a lot
to,
of this, all the interesting stuff we do between the breaks end up at the end of the episode anyway, so don't worry. We'll that shout out will get out there.
Also asked here, before we get onto the actual thing, what are you going to pick? Because we might actually have picked the same thing.
What am I going to pick for what I'm talking about?
Yeah, for what you're talking about.
Dungeon Meshi. Dungeon Meshi. Also, a Don Quixote and Cultish.
Oh, Don Quixote is a good one. Absolutely talk about Don Quixote. It's really interesting. And we can wrap it back around to what we talked about at the start with Homestuck.
All right. I'm going to bring us back.
I might talk about Limbus Company and board games then.
All right. I'm going to start with you, Iris. Oh, hey. Are you still here? Wow. Well, the episode is over, but if you're bored, why not go to patreon.com and support the show for as little as $1 a month? Yeah, you can just scroll down and get the link. It's Patreon that makes this and all of our other content possible. Don't you want to join the other floorheads on the Patreon Discord? Anyway, thanks for sticking around. Take care. Bye.